Okay, good evening and a warm welcome to those attending and to also our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is the Major Planning Applications Committee and myself, Steve Tuckwell, will be chairing this evening's meeting. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room. It's also accessible online on the live broadcast. For those present in the room this evening and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those solely observing in the room today, you may wish to know that the camera is angled away from the public gallery from where you are sitting. A reminder to those speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on. Some domestic arrangements in relation to fire alarms. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits out of the building to the designated meeting points at the front of the building. For mobile and tablet devices, for those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices before the meeting starts or put them onto silent. Please note that the councillors on the committee may use their laptops or tablets during the meeting to view the agenda paperwork. You're also reminded you can complete one of the yellow resident feedback forms. The information on these is intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Forms can be completed and left in the room for collection after the meeting or completed and returned by post on the address on the form. If you are watching on YouTube, you can complete the form online and there is a link below the broadcast. Okay, that's the chairman's announcements. I will now do some introductions of the people participating in this evening's meeting. Starting off with, we've got Councillor Higgins, who's our Vice Chairman. We've got Councillor Chapman. We've got Councillor Cawthorne, Councillor Duncan, the Opposition Lead, and we have Councillor Jazz Dotts and Councillor Yarrow. Those are the voting members for this evening's proceedings. But this meeting is also supported by a number of officers, starting with James Roger, our Head of Planning. We've got Mandrit Malhotra, who's our Planning Manager and will be doing most of the presenting this evening. We've got Sanoba Khan, who's representing Highways and will be giving us Highways advice this evening. We've got Nicole Cameron from Legal, and bringing it all together this evening, the gentleman on my right is Neil Fraser from Democratic Services. Okay, that's pretty much all of the chairman's announcements for this evening. We'll go straight into the agenda, starting with agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
All members are present, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest for matters coming before this meeting this evening. Are there any? Not seeing any indications, that's good. Agenda item 3 is to sign off the minutes from the previous meeting. Can I take those as agreed? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 4 this evening is matters that have been notified in advance or urgent, which there aren't any. We can go straight to agenda item 5, which is to confirm any items in part 1. All items this evening will be in public, which is considered part 1. There are no items in part 2, and the agenda will be followed as published this evening. Okay. We can now get into the main body of this evening's meeting, which is to discuss the applications. So we've got agenda item 6, which is the former Vale Garden Centre on Peeled Heath Road. This is a petition item this evening, so we have got a number of petitioners and applicants speaking. So I'll hand over to Mandip to take us through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Agenda item number 6 is the former Vale Garden Centre on Peeled Heath Road. The plan on screen shows the application site boundary. Access is off Peeled Heath Road and it leads directly into the car park of what was the former garden centre. The application site is located within the Greenbelt, and that's the primary concern with one of the reasons for refusal within the committee report. This is the existing block plan, so in its former use it was a garden centre that had principally vehicular parking for visitors at the front with extensive open grounds with selling garden produce. The proposed site plan seeks to infill lots of those open areas to the rear of the garden centre with 5 new temporary workshop buildings. So those are the ones coloured in a slightly lighter colour. The darker, should I call it a pink or brown shade, are the existing buildings which are being reused for film operating purposes, and the car parking area will stay as is. Now, I would like to draw your attention to the addendum. We had a letter from the applicants, primarily because the report refers to the film studio uses as a as a sui generis use. Now, we have taken on board that at the time the application was submitted, they didn't have a huge amount of information about what the use of the site would be within the buildings. They've now clarified that the uses would comprise, and it's set out in the addendum, workshops, prop storage and costume space. Therefore, filming would occur on site. These are more the back of house facilities to enable the filming. On that basis, we're proposing to add an informative, or via the addendum today, we're clarifying that the use of the site is not a SUI use. It would be classed as B1C or B, which is the former B use classes, or EG3, which is the new use class order. The reason we're trying to clarify that through the addendum is primarily that if this goes through the appeal process, and we also envisage it might go through the enforcement process, because everything is already up on site, and I'll show you some photos of that, we don't want that to complicate matters through an enforcement process or through an appeal procedure. So we're happy to say that the site is operating, or going to operate when it starts a B use or a EG3 use. If I take you through the plans, these are I guess they're called proposed plans for the purposes of the application. However, these buildings are actually up and on site. They have been building the units for some time. Residents have raised lots of objections and complaints, quite rightly so, because they were done so without planning permission. So that's 5 of these have been constructed in and around the garden centre facilities. So this is the bird's eye view of the former garden centre. I have a few photographs. So this is the entrance into the garden centre and the back of Heath School. This is a historic photo showing the car park at full occupancy. Now, consent had been granted for a temporary use of this site for overspill Hillingdon Hospital car parking. So most of those cars on site that you can see from this historic photo would have been Hillingdon Hospital staff. That use has now ceased. So as of, if I take you forward a few steps, these are some of the historic photos. Yesterday, these temporary buildings have been erected on site. So there are some porter cabins on the left. There were some vehicles, but not a lot of vehicles on site. And I'm not sure if you can actually see them past the trees, but that's the former garden centre building. And if I scroll forward, in the distance behind the trees, you can actually see the temporary buildings that have been erected on site. That was trying to demonstrate where the buildings are, but it's quite difficult to see past the gates. The application has been recommended for refusal. A significant element of the proposed development is assessed to have been inappropriate development and harmful to the greenbelt. The applicant has provided what they deem to be very special circumstances. However, it's not considered that outweighs the harm to the greenbelt in this instance. The application is recommended for refusal with the note via the addendum about the change of the land use. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mandip, for taking us through that. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, this is our first petition item of this evening, and we have our petitioner, Andrew Alloway. Good evening, Andrew. Welcome. Just to explain how this works now, so you've got a prescribed amount of time to address the committee this evening, which is 5 minutes. The traffic light system, it sounds a bit archaic, but it works. The traffic light system in front of us will be green for 4 minutes. In your final minute, it will go to amber, and then when it gets to the 5th minute, it goes to red, and at that point, I will have to stop you. So I'm sure you've practiced, but the floor is yours, sir.
Councillors, let me thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening following the petition raised by residents of Cowley in opposition to the application. It's very apparent that the applicant is attempting to ride roughshod over established policies, concerns of residents and the council by attempting to place an inappropriate industrial development on greenbelt land immediately adjacent to residential properties. In raising the petition, I spoke with many local residents who willingly signed and often raised their own comments and concerns, which I have categorised and propose to give you an overview in the next few minutes. I and many other residents chose the locality because of the greenbelt and lack of development. The nursery and garden centre were never a problem. Noise. I, along with my family, have lived adjacent to the site for 34 years, and prior to that, as a teenager, worked on the nursery. In that time, local residents have never experienced the level of continuous, seemingly interminable noise and disturbance that we've endured for the past 5 months, including HGVs sitting with engines idling just metres away from houses, cranes, excavators operating and much more. This has meant working from home for many of the local residents has been extremely difficult and relaxing in the gardens almost impossible at times. Work has been undertaken at 7 a.m. through to late at night, by which I mean 9, 10 and 11 p.m. on several occasions, all day on Saturdays and Sundays too. Only today we've been subjected to prolonged episodes of beeping from manoeuvring machinery, often audible over 100 metres away, together with radios and music blaring out. A lot of the noise we hear is from inside the buildings, which suggests the irritation will continue once the site is in use unless the development is stopped. The fauna and wildlife. The application claims the lack of local fauna. This may be true now, however 5 months ago that was not the case. Several families of solitary deer were present in the area and they would be seen on a daily basis, including on the site, and were also present on the site during nursery and garden centre operations. They have been seen once in the past 5 months. Similarly, foxes would make many appearances every day, now maybe once or twice a week. The land situated, as you know, in the green belt, and industrialisation is totally inappropriate. Losing one small piece may seem insignificant, but it soon adds up, and with everything else happening locally, it's extremely important to maintain as much green belt as we can. Almost every signatory was aghast at the prospect of this. And it could be seen that further encroachment into the valuable asset, this just might be the start. Furthermore, you may also be aware of the previous planning inquiry that put specific conditions on the land use, many of which are being breached by this applicant. The river pin and flooding. The application states there is no watercourse close by. The site is immediately adjacent to an area of marshland with a drainage stream that runs directly into the river pin approximately 25 metres away. There's a requirement for surface water to be stored on site. This no longer happens. Water runs off the buildings in uncontrolled ways and immediately starts to cause flooding on the adjacent land. Employment. Several signatories of the petition have raised doubts about the claimed employment benefits to Hillingdon residents, and one well-respected resident stated in an email to me, sadly, this is not a real employment opportunity for local people. And also, why would a university degree student wish to spend time working a set construction workshop? The traffic. Large numbers of commercial vehicles are using the site, and often they're causing hold-ups on Piltheath Road whilst they attempt to enter the site. On one day alone, I witnessed at least 6 full-size HGVs visiting the site within a space of a few hours. The application, as you're aware, this is a retrospective application that only appeared once complaints have been raised with the council regarding the development and noise. And when the original complaint about noise was raised with Brunel, the landowners, we were told it's only clearing up on some small temporary buildings. Now, I'd like to mention some of the false claims in the application. It was claimed the site was vacant. It was actually in use by Brunel University, and as we now know, the car park was available for Hillingdon Hospital staff, for which you, the planning committee, recently kindly gave permission for 5 years of use. We assume 250 staff have no parking available to them. There are temporary structures there that do not match those on the application, at least 6 or 8 full-size shipping containers being used. In conclusion, we hope that our input into the effect of wildlife, damage to the green belt, lack of consideration for local residents will help you with your depth of experience to determine the unsuitability of this development being closed for the proposed site. It's also obvious that the applicants have no respect for due and correct process or yourselves, the local elected representatives, and I sincerely ask that you refuse the application and initiate enforcement action. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much, and on behalf of the committee this evening, thank you for addressing us with your comments. Okay, right, we have the applicant or agent, Mr. Oliver Bell. Yes, sorry, any questions for the petitioner? Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. That was very detailed and very useful information for us, or certainly for me, and I'm sure my colleagues. Can I just ask you a little bit more about the flooding, or the water situation as you see it and understand it? I mean, if I understood you right, there's quite a lot of surface water runoff now that
Yes.
you were saying, and this is pooling, because we know that we all know we have flooding problems with the river Pin, and this is close to that. So are you saying that there is more now that this
We've
building
witnessed-
and activity has happened?
We've witnessed flowing water running across the rear area that was previously used as a cafeteria and recreational area, which now is being used for large vehicles to be parked and excavators and such. The water's flooding across there, and I think 2 days ago we had a heavy rain, and myself and my neighbours have witnessed it flooding off there straight onto the common land immediately to the south.
Okay, any other questions for the petitioner? Okay, right, we'll move on to the agent or applicant, who I've got down here as Mr. Oliver Bell.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, same rules apply, 5 minutes with the traffic light system. When it gets to red, we'll have to ask you to stop. So it's over to you to address the committee.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. I speak today on behalf of the applicant, Locate Studios and the Structure Group, in respect of this application. The film and TV industry has been one of the fastest growing sectors in the UK economy for a number of years, fueled by government incentives and initiatives to encourage such uses, coupled with the exceptional talent pool that exists, principally in the southeast of England. The shortage of purpose-built studios and production support space is, however, a major issue in the UK industry, with the COVID-19 pandemic only serving to make the situation worse through increased demand for content and greater backlog of productions to be shot. My client works with production companies to help address these issues and try to ensure that major productions can be accommodated within the UK, in turn meaning the economic benefits they bring can be realised in our country. This application has been submitted to facilitate a major international feature film production for Apple Studios. Whilst this particular film will be shot on location across the UK and Malta, rather than in traditional studios, it still requires production support space. As such, the site will be used for costume, makeup, props and workshops to create sets. With the production only taking place for a period of 9 months, it has been incredibly difficult to find a landlord that would accommodate a leaseholder for such a short period of time. This site did, however, prove the perfect opportunity, as it was vacant, strategically well located, included existing buildings that could be converted, and already benefited from hard standing but temporary demountable structures could be erected upon. It also had a willing landlord. As you've heard, the site is located in the Greenbelt, meaning the temporary structures require very special circumstances to be demonstrated in accordance with national policy. We've set this case out in our planning application, which I don't propose to repeat, but I do propose to provide you with a summary for ease of reference of the key elements of our case. These include the reuse of a vacant brownfield site, as encouraged by national policy, the application only being temporary, and that it requires no intrusive works and the use will cease within 9 months' time. Bringing substantial investment from a major international film production company into the Borough and the UK, creating 100 direct jobs almost immediately and supporting a further 100 jobs in the supply chain. Enhancing the vitality of local services for additional demands such as hotels, restaurants, convenience stores, taxi companies, and creating educational opportunities for the next generation of skilled personnel, such as work experience or placements for students at Brunel University. I freely admit that it's unfortunate that we're in a situation whereby development has commenced prior to planning permission being granted. This is not, however, uncommon in the film industry at present due to demand and supply issues I've already outlined. Indeed, my clients were in a position whereby if a site was not delivered in accordance with the timescales required by the production, the entire production would have been lost to Hillingdon and the UK, likely moving to Europe. In this context, it should be noted that the overall production has a budget in the region of $200 million. It supports 300 jobs on a day-to-day basis and some 600 additional staff on crowd shoot days across multiple sites on location. Acknowledging the benefits of the proposals, we have received letters of support from the British Film Commission, Film London and West London Business. We're aware, and as we've heard, there's a petition being raised in relation to the application, and the committee report has, for the first time since submitting the application, provided us with an understanding of the concerns raised by consultees, officers and the general public. We have sought to engage with officers prior to and during the consideration of our application, but unfortunately we were unable to secure a meeting or dialogue to discuss our proposals. But that said, we do understand the resourcing challenges the council is under. As you would expect, we are of a view that the proposals represent the set of very special circumstances necessary to support the development. There are, however, very clearly outstanding comments from officers, consultees and the general public, as reported in the committee report, and we would be delighted to engage on and discuss these matters, but have not had the opportunity to date. It is on this basis that we'd actually ask this committee to consider deferring this application to allow us to engage with your officers and resolve outstanding areas of concern to help support this important film production and its associated benefits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and again thank you on behalf of the committee for your comments this evening. Okay, any questions for the applicant from members? Councillor Yarrow.
Yes, could I just establish something? During your speech you said that you had a willing landlord. Who was that?
The freeholder of the site is the University Brunel.
And they were willing for it to take place?
They were willing to agree to contractual terms to facilitate the occupation of the site.
Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question actually, and it's in relation to the point on flooding that was raised by the petitioner. I just wondered if you could respond to the concerns around flooding on the site.
Yes, well, I think what I can say is that we have, in support of the application, submitted a flood risk assessment and a drainage assessment, which has considered the impact in terms of fluvial flooding and surface water issues. So that is considered within our report. Obviously, we've now heard today that there has been some issues raised by the local resident. I think that's something which clearly we would be more than happy to look into. I think just unfortunately we haven't had the opportunity to do that to date.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to come in there, James? Okay. Councillor Cawthorne.
Yes, I have a question. The question of the submission of an alternative site assessment as required by the sequential test, we understand from the papers that hasn't happened. Is that correct? And can you explain why, please?
Yes, we do note there is a reference to an alternative site assessment. That isn't something which is required as a matter of national policy in respect of Greenbelt. Sequential tests are required in respect of flooding, an alternative sites assessment, but the site is located with built areas within flood zone 1, so that wasn't necessary, and that's detailed within our flood risk assessment. We have said that we will be more than happy to provide some further information to explain the rationale as to how we arrived at this site in the Greenbelt, as we realise that is the issue that's been raised. And hopefully I've started to allude to some of those issues in my speech today.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other members indicate. James, did you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, if I can just perhaps help members with some of the issues raised. I did actually just want to firstly say, just so members are clear, that the refusal reasons officers are putting forward are the inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, a technical highways refusal reason 2, because there's a conflict with the London plan, and then the third reason does address a number of the points raised by the petitioners in that it does that's the noise refusal reason in effect, which does cover both adjoining occupiers and the site of nature importance, the impacts from noise on the wildlife in effect. So the only point that we haven't put forward as a refusal reason in effect raised by the petitioners is the flooding issue. On the flooding issue firstly, the agent is correct that there was some technical information put in support of the application, which under normal circumstances, if we had a planning application that hadn't been built, what we would have done in this case is we'd have put conditions to deal with sustainable drainage, and in effect I have no doubt that some of the recommendations in the reports would have been incorporated in those conditions to deal with surface water drainage issues. I think the problem here, and the reason why the residents have flagged an issue, is that they've built the development and they haven't put in sustainable drainage. So, but with regard to from a sort of technical planning perspective, the question committee needs to ask itself is this something that could be overcome by conditions? And I think it could. And if the answer to that question is yes, then it means you can't do a fourth refusal reason. So I wouldn't be recommending a fourth refusal reason, not because I'm in any way disagreeing with residents that there might be surface water flooding issues, but simply because if we could, through planning conditions, seek to address those issues. And just to clarify, the buildings themselves are not in the floodplain, but there has been issues of surface water drainage problems connected with the garden centre. So it's all to do with the flows of water in effect. So I would say my view is that conditions should be able to overcome those issues were committee considering an approval. But with reference to the number one refusal reason, this is basically industrial buildings in the Greenbelt, and in your officer's view, it's therefore inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And I have to say, we just do not agree with the applicant and agent's point of view that this is the only location these buildings could have been erected in. So, as has been referenced, this is a connection with the film studios 5 to 6 miles away. But in that regard, if you were looking at something not far from the film studios, you could potentially be looking at sites across quite a large part of the West London, Thames Valley sub-region, which includes numerous industrial estates. So in summary, in effect, your officers consider there are 3 robust refusal reasons, but I wouldn't be recommending a fourth reason be added. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, James, for that input. Right, we've heard from the petitioners, we've heard from the applicant. I can't see any ward councillors to add to the debate, so we can open it up for members to deliberate. Councillor Higgins, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. I just don't understand why the university in itself knew that this wasn't an appropriate development. It's like we've had a lot of terms sort of bounced around: brownfield, greenbelt. Is part of this a brownfield site? Is that what we're trying to say? And then part of it is not. I just wanted some clarity on that.
It is land in the Greenbelt.
Okay, fine. That's fine.
I think other terms are in this case not particularly relevant.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
just making for clarity because it was banded about. I don't have any problems with this to support officer's recommendation on this. It very saddens me that no one's had the bothered. They just think that. I know that the film industry is one of those things that sort of, it's a live thing that just thinks that they can just get on with things because they're always working on a short thing. I'm sure they don't mean any malice by it, but I just think that this is just, you have to follow procedures, and you must come in, have a planning application before you use anything. I mean, and the traffic and the workload 24/7 is just unacceptable for anybody, I think. So I will propose this, and I will leave it before.
Okay, so you're moving officer's recommendation. On that note, I'll let James come in with a point.
I've just realised there's something we forgot to mention to committee, just so you're aware the Mayor of London is objecting to this application as well, with reference to the inappropriate development in the Greenbelt.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan, you indicated, then I've got Councillor Chapman to follow.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second this. I hear what James advises on the flooding, but not so very long ago we had one house being extended in Moorfield Road, just to the south of this, and I know we did propose conditions for that, but in the end, when we examined the conditions, we found that there was still a possibility of buildings being flooded there, and we're all very aware, I think, of flooding risks now. I'm very concerned to hear that these buildings have been put up without planning permission. I don't know if that was done by Brunel or by the film company in anticipation of an approval, but I would like to take up the request that the petitioner made that we do look at these buildings with a view to having them removed. Quite apart from anything else, if there's more surface water runoff, of course there will be, because there's greater area being covered by buildings. So I'd like to second it, voice my concerns about flooding, but accept the advice of Head of Planning and ask if an enforcement investigation can be carried out, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Obviously, we don't want to stray into Part 2 territory, but your point is noted, and I'm sure we'll delegate authority to Head of Planning to pursue that. Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman, followed by Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you, Chairman. I was simply going to second it, to be honest. I would very much echo what Councillor Higgins has said. I think there's three very good conditions here, three very good reasons, should I say, and sadly I don't see any special circumstances to pass it, so I just wanted to second it, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you. I'm very much in agreement with what's been said thus far. I support the recommendation. We do know the film industry in the UK is booming, but this is an odd choice of site, frankly, for a venture backed by a global production company, I thought. I think the blight to residents caused by the preemptive use of this site without consent is unacceptable in my mind. I cannot understand, if that much rests on the use of this site, why an alternative site assessment hasn't been submitted as required, as the report indicates. They're my observations. A couple of questions while I'm talking, if that's all right. The first one is about the alternative site analysis. We heard from the applicant, I think, that wasn't a requirement under national policy. I think I heard that. Perhaps we can have clarification from the officer, if that's all right. The other one is about the site itself, because we've got on page 10 we hear that the site is screened by existing dense vegetation not readily visible. Yet on page 22 we hear that the openness of the green belt, particularly when viewed from neighbouring gardens, is affected. So I wasn't quite sure how those two statements fitted together, so if I can ask about that too, please.
So a couple of points there. I think there'll be a double act here between Mandip and James, but the requirement for an alternative location and the screening of the site.
If we start with the screening of the site, it's probably a bit simpler. So the references to lack of visibility from the street frontage would be the street frontage of Peeled Heath Road. So there is a dense area of vegetation, and only once you've gone down the access track do you actually see or get any vantage points of the site. However, it is visible from its surrounding neighbouring properties, and so there's a large residential area directly to the east, which does have significant views, and less so to the southwest corner, but there are views of the application site. If I turn to very special circumstances, yes, you are correct in what you heard the applicant say. There are various ways in which you can demonstrate very special circumstances. One of them, you are correct, is alternative sites, and one that we would encourage was lodged, and that's why the policy officer has cited on page 21 that there was no alternative site selection, but it's one method in the Greenbelt assessment that could be used, but hasn't been in this instance. I have already forgotten the third point. I know there was three.
I think there was only two, actually.
Oh, there was only two. Perfect. Thank you.
We can get a third one for you if you want, but there was only two. Okay, James, did you want to pick up on anything on that, or are you happy with that?
No, I think Mandip's covered.
Okay. Right, I'm not seeing any other members indicate that they wish to speak, so I will remind us that we are moved and we are seconded, so we can actually go to the vote on this application this evening. So can I take a vote in favour of officer's recommendation? That's unanimous, Neil, yeah? Okay, I can confirm that agenda item 6 this evening is refused. Thank you very much, everybody. We can now go on to agenda item 7, which is land of Hayes End Road. This is a petition item this evening, so we'll hand over to Mandip to take us through it.
Thank you, Chairman. The next application is for the demolition of the existing building. So on the site plan, it's described as a warehouse, and it is a commercial operation at the moment, which fronts onto Hayes End Road. The application proposes the total demolition of the building and its replacement with a 4-storey block of 27 residential units with no commercial proposed on this site at all. If I just flag up, the constraints plan at the moment shows the area of Greenbelt and the locally listed building which is cited in the application report. Now, we received a statement from a local resident objecting on various principles. Now, one of the points raised in the objection letter was with respect to the impact on the heritage assets of the listed building and the listed wall across the road. Now, this has been fully assessed by the Council's Conservation and Design Officer, and it's not considered to be harmful given the separation distances between the application site and the heritage assets on the opposite side of the road. If I move on, so we have strange that we have a roof plan as the first plan, so I apologise for that, but this shows the general layout of the application site. Murray Grey House, the block to the north, are both existing residential developments, so they are approximately 3 to 4 stories, and you'll see them in the images shortly. I just wanted to flag up and bring to your attention that this application site was at planning committee last year, possibly the year before, or has maybe even been here twice, and is being redeveloped for housing. So this site was an office to residential conversion. They came in later to knock the whole site down and provide a fully residential block, which has been approved. I'm not entirely certain if it's under construction yet, but that is also another residential area. So the block is on the frontage of Newport Road, and its car parking area is to the rear of the site. So in that vein, when this application came in on the opposite side of the boundary fence, we tried to make sure that both developments could work together, and that's primarily the reason that the car parking and amenity areas are located to the rear, and the frontage of the site accommodates the main building blocks. Just for context as well, this is an office to residential conversion, which I believe is constructed, but it is an office to residential. It does look very much like an office building. And 1190, which is to the south of the site, is a former petrol station. It is, I believe it's operating as a car wash stroke car sales business at the moment, but much effort has been made when we've been looking at the proposals on this application site to make sure that the development on the current proposed site does not blight the land to the south. And the applicants have worked with us. It's probably clearer in some other plans, but there are some oriel windows whereby direction of view is taken towards Hayes End Road to avoid direct windows being facing out onto 1190, and to enable that site can come forward with its maximum capacity. I'll take you through to the ground and first floor plans, which have been amended throughout the course of the application. One of the initial concerns with the scheme was that there was insufficient provision of family housing. So turning to what has delivered the family housing, what happened was that areas of bin store and cycle storage were removed from within the building and provided externally. I'll show you those on the site plan, but that did facilitate the delivery of increased provision of family housing on the site. So that isn't a reason for refusal. 6 family homes on this site is definitely something that the report acknowledges is positive and we support. I'll take you up to the second and third floor, so you can see the upper floor has been set in, so it appears as a slightly subordinate addition to the building itself. That's very similar to the scheme that was approved on the back of this site on Newport Road. These are the elevations of the site, so you can see that the development is akin to Murray Grey House to the north of the site, so it's not substantially higher. These are the south and north elevations. On the northern elevation, which is, I believe it's this site, there are only high-level windows to prevent any overlooking to the existing residential properties. And on the southern elevations, it's not overly clear, but these are oriel windows so that they do not look onto 1190 Uxbridge Road. This is the existing arrangement on site, so you'll see that there's a fairly large warehouse, lots of peripheral car parking, as well as an open storage yard along the northern boundary. Now, one of the comments made by the petitioner in this statement that was issued to all members this afternoon was the relationship being along the northern boundary being detrimental to the occupiers here. Now, on the basis that this is all open storage at the moment, the relationship for it being replaced with car parking for residents, which, you know, comings and goings are fairly limited, I can't support the concerns that have been raised, primarily because of what the existing situation is. But I'm happy to take any questions. I do have some photos about. This is the existing warehouse, so it's existing at 2 stories with, as I said, lots of car parking along the frontage. Again, the frontage of the building, and in the distance we can see 1190 Uxbridge Road. I think this is the best photo that tries to show you where the open storage of the yard is and the adjoining residential property here. So there is sufficient separation distances to the new build property, as well as those high-level windows to prevent overlooking to the properties, but their residents of this block have raised concerns about the car parking area for the proposed development being here. Now, in all other respects, the application could be recommended for approval. However, following months of negotiation on affordable housing, we have been unable to reach agreement. So that is the only reason for refusal as set out on page 40. So there are 2 reasons. One being affordable housing, and the second being no legal agreement being secured on the site. So the council's appointed independent viability consultants deems the site to be viable. The applicant contends that the scheme is unviable and will not deliver any on-site or off-site affordable housing. We are at that point now where we're not going to reach agreement. We have been back and forth on multiple occasions, and that's why the application is before you with a recommendation for refusal. It's a bit disappointing because in all other respects the application is an approval in bulk, height, scale, meets all other policies, but delivering 0% affordable housing is not something that we could support. So the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mandip. And it doesn't look like Mr. Damien Gray has been able to make it with us this evening. But we have got his written statement, which Neil is going to read out for us.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this was circulated to the committee somewhat earlier, but I will read it for the record. So this is the statement from Mr. Gray, the petitioner, in objection to the application. Hillingdon Council stresses that it puts residents first, therefore I hope they are true to their word. As the lead petitioner, the following points are a reflection of such residents, which include key workers like myself. Number 1, by reason of its excessive height and frontage width, the proposal represents no overdevelopment of this compact site and is out of keeping with the street scene and the character of the area. The higher elevation also would exacerbate this, thus impacting the privacy of Charolais House residents. Therefore, the fact that the proposed development is 15.4 metres from Charolais House must also take height elevation into account too and does not mitigate it. The comparison to a similar development on Newport Road is inaccurate, as that development is on a similar gradient and elevation to Charolais House. Number 2, our right to light is protected in England and Wales under common law, adverse possession or by the Prescription Act 1832. The report of the Head of Planning indicated all windows met the target value. No flats were accessed during the time stated to gain such data, therefore such data and related conclusions should be deemed admissible. Number 3, the building would encroach on the setting of a listed building and listed wall across the road at Springwell Nursery. It would be detrimental to the setting of the listed wall and listed building. Number 4, the proposal will be detrimental to the free movement of traffic on Hayes End Road, as well as detrimental to pedestrian safety by the creation of a bottleneck due to the increase in traffic. Number 5, the siting of car parking next to the gardens and balconies of flats at Charolais House is going to subject those homeowners to noise, fumes, and making the gardens and balconies unusable. Number 6, future users of the proposed car parking bays will have full and open views into the gardens and windows at Charolais House, as the application site is on slightly higher ground than Charolais House. Number 7, failure to protect most people during the daytime with the proposed functional project. Number 8, the site should resort from a brownfield site to a greenfield site. This would be in line with the Mayor of London's Policy 7.18, protecting open space and addressing deficiency. Number 9, my 3 previous versions of complaints did highlight the elevated health risk associated with living near roads. It is unlikely to be explained by the PM 2.5 mass, since it is only slightly elevated near roads. In contrast, levels of such pollutants as ultrafine particles, carbon monoxide, NO2, black carbon, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and some metals are more elevated near roads. Individually or in combination, these are likely to be responsible for the observed adverse effects on health. This clearly illustrates that the Highway Authority obviously are not aware of the existing issues along Hayes End Road, nor how the owners of the former Texaco garage regularly park their fleet of cars along Hayes End Road. Number 10, the proposed bin area would be clearly visible from the main road. The positioning of the bin store is also in contravention of guidance from the CFPAE on bin separation distances from dwellings, stating bins should not be stored within 6 metres of dwellings. The proposed position is certainly within 6 metres of my living room, kitchen number 9, as well as number 12's living room and kitchen. Therefore, these pose a serious health risk to my family and neighbour. How are we supposed to sit in our garden and avoid vehicle fumes as well as the stench from the bin store? This will also attract vermin, thus not meeting the LBH air quality management guidelines. And number 11, the most recent amendments clearly shows that the substation is still extremely close to my property and private garden. The detectable noise and magnetic field from the substation extends between 3 and 8 metres away. Thus, the proposal fails to meet the Healthy Streets agenda as it places my living room within the detectable magnetic field. This clearly would still pose a potential threat to my family and other Charolais residents. Thames Water was consulted as the proposed development is located within 15 metres of underground wastewater. What about our human rights and putting us first? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, Neil, and thank you to Mr Gray for submitting your statement. For obvious reasons, we're not going to be able to ask any questions of the petitioner, so we'll go straight over to the applicant, which is Alan Evans. So, Mr Evans, you have your 5 minutes, green, amber, red, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the representation by the petitioner and from the presentation from the planning officer. As you've just heard, members, the scheme before you this evening is a positive development proposal. It's been undertaken with significant collaboration with planning officers in your local authority, and you know, for the benefit of the proposals before you. The development seeks to deliver 27 high-quality residential units, and which essentially, and in summary, represents a material improvement to the character of the area. The regeneration benefits of the proposal before you this evening are indeed multiple. It will deliver a significantly enhanced townscape, including enhancing the setting of the relatively nearby listed building and wall. It provides a genuine mix of housing, including 6 family units, which are all located bar one on the ground floor of the proposal. It optimises brownfield land. At the same time, that reduces pressure on the greenbelt to deliver much needed additional housing. A planning consent for the scheme of this scale would deliver nearly £200,000 in SIL tax for Hillingdon Borough, and on top of that it would bring new residents to the area. It is, as you've heard, unfortunately, despite that, recommended for refusal, and the applicant's position sort of maintains that this is fundamentally flawed. I have the benefit of living in a house that I can see is owner-occupied, albeit with a mortgage, and your planning officers are similarly blessed. This application, the development before you this evening, seeks to redress the patent imbalance between my generation and today's first-time buyers and renters, who is acknowledged have been prejudiced by decades of lack of housing supply, outstripped by demand. The applicant themselves are a local builder with an established relationship with Hillingdon Council and Hillingdon Housing. Approval of the application allows that builder to get on and build and deliver the regeneration benefits. The site itself, it's in an industrial use, and the land itself possesses an inherent value. Flat sales in this locale, this part of the district, are lower. They are relatively low in comparison to the borough average. Build costs are high and are rising. those three elements contrive to on a scheme of this scale, to make it unviable to deliver at this stage on-site affordable housing. The Mayor of London does have an established planning policy to allow a review mechanism to take place as part of any Section 106 that puts aside today's financial viability position with the option for a review either before building starts and or towards the completion of the development itself. So what it does effectively is would allow a second bite at the cherry to demonstrate whether or not affordable housing can be delivered with this. And on that note, I respectfully request that members this evening defer the application should you be unable to deem an approval, to allow for a Section 106 to be drafted between the applicant and the local authority, which would allow the review mechanism to establish a revised financial viability position further down the line. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for addressing the committee, Mr. Bell. Any questions from members? Councillor Higgins.
I can't understand why you. Firstly, I don't understand why you've been working so well with officers. You're pushing on an open door. It's a good proposal. I don't really have a problem with this, and as officers said, it would go up for approval. But I don't understand why you haven't come to an agreement now in asking us to defer it. And also, you said it would benefit first-time buyers. Can you tell me how that will benefit first-time buyers?
Principally, the prospective sales values for flats, particularly 1 and 2 bed flats in this location in Hayes End, in the district, are more closely aligned to individual owner, income profile levels. So it's simply that those house flat prices would sell at a more affordable level for those on that sort of type of income.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Duncan.
I think we're at a policy standoff in a way. That's what this is. We like the development, but policy intervenes. When you said that it's no longer viable, are you taking into account the increased cost of materials? Is that one of the factors?
That's correct, Councillor. Yes, we are. So the viability appraisal sets the sales values, projected sales values for the 27 flats against the build costs of the scheme, and that includes the build cost inflation, and that cost has been measured by an independent build cost consultant to itemise every aspect of the build.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any other members wishing to ask a question? No? Okay. Well, to the applicant, thank you very much for addressing the committee this evening on behalf of the committee. Thank you. We've got no ward councillors here. We can open it up for debate. But Mandy, did you want to come in before we open it up to members?
So I just want to touch on the matter of deferral. So the reason we are at this position, apologies, Councillor Higgins, it was Councillor Higgins' question. So in order to, if we were to defer this application, the reason I would not recommend it is because the review mechanism has to have an agreed benchmark value. We have not been able to get to an agreed position on what that value that would go into a legal agreement would be, and therefore deferral for another month, I don't believe we would get to an agreed position on that value. That is why this application is recommended for refusal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. James, did you want to come in with some of the points that you heard earlier?
Yeah, we haven't come back as officers on the points the original petitioner raised, so I just wanted to do that if that's okay. So effectively, pretty much all the points the petitioners raised relate to the area of land you can see in the slide. There's more than 15 metre separation. The window arrangements, the use of oriel windows, are such that there's not an overlooking, that there's not a daylight, sunlight or residential amenity adverse impact. And then the other points the petitioner was raising was relating to the parking layout, the refuse store and the substation. Now, in terms of the existing context, we wouldn't be able to refuse an application with regard to any of those points. That said, Mandip and I were talking this afternoon about whether there could be a slightly improved layout with respect to the refuse store and substation. So what I'm basically saying is we don't consider we could refuse the scheme, but we could possibly consider an informative that advises the applicant that were they to resubmit, we want them to look closely at the refuse store and substation to see if there's a more sympathetic layout. If you were to delegate authority to me to write a suitably worded informative, I might refer to sort of landscaping and other matters, but in effect, I do think it might help if we add an informative that refers to the words I'd use, perhaps more sympathetic layout with respect to the refuse store and substation close to Charleroi House. If you're happy to delegate that to me to come up with an appropriate wording. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that, James. Right, we've heard from the petitioner, we've heard from the applicant, we've got no ward councillors here. Councillor Higgins, you indicated first.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I understand why people make petitions, but surely a housing facility would look a lot better than that. That's all I would say on that matter. I think this is a real shame. I really do. I think it's a real shame. It's either show me the money or give me a house for affordable housing. It's that simple. I just wanted to ask one question before I propose it, is that when we go into 106 agreements, do we ask for money up front? I thought we always waited till it was completed anyway, till we got paid. Is it something that I should, legal better tell me off?
I'm just wondering, it might help if I kind of explain slightly more about the sort of viability side of things so members fully understand what they're voting on. So in effect, with the viability appraisals, a developer profit is factored in, normally about 15 to 20%. So and then what the problem is here is that the council's expert viability consultant is saying there is a surplus of money in effect which should be reinvested in affordable housing, and the applicant is saying that there isn't a financial surplus, that when they put in all the inputs into the financial viability appraisal, materials costs, etc., that the development isn't viable. They'd still get a profit because that's allowed, but there isn't enough money for affordable housing. And on that point, there's a significant difference between the experts insofar as the viability, third-party viability expert is saying that there's quite a lot of money that could be, in effect, whether it's an off-site financial contribution or, to be honest, I don't think we'd accept that. We'd be looking at on-site affordable given the level of, given how viable our consultant is saying this development is. So it's unusual there's quite such a big difference between the experts, but there is. So your officer's view basically is this development should be delivering affordable housing. The applicant, put bluntly, is unwilling to. I can understand why they're unwilling, because they're saying, their experts are saying it's unviable, but we have a different opinion, and hence we are strongly recommending members refuse the application, notwithstanding the fact that we feel the principle and the design of the scheme is actually acceptable.
Councillor Higgins, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. So just to get to the end of that, so there's a difference of the profit margin that the applicant is trying to say that, and we're saying, but we have a formula, don't we, as a council, how we calculate this on this area and stuff like that, don't we?
We have factored in that there'd be some standard Section 106 obligations, and that there'd be SIL payments, but as I say, our viability consultant says that there is this is a profitable scheme on top of the normal developer profit, and that, as such, that additional money should be effectively considered as affordable housing in simple terms.
I just wanted to make it clear to residents who are viewing this that we're not here to make money out of people. we have a formula that we move for
no,
every...
So our
it's
policy,
for-
our policy requirement is that if it's viable for a scheme to provide affordable housing, it should provide affordable housing.
Which is needed, especially in that area. I totally agree with that. I will propose this and with the added informative. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. I've got Councillor Duncan, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted, just a couple of points, but I just wanted to take up this issue of the adjoining residential building being 15 metres. It's 15 point something metres, so it's quite close. This is a 4-storey building, and it's north facing. So, in relation to the existing residential building, so I think that there may be some degree of overshadowing because it's not going to, at the moment, those windows in the residential building are south-facing. They'll get a lot of light and a lot of sunlight. Once there's a building 15 metres away, they won't. And so I'd like to know if any of those are windows to habitable rooms that are just the single window to that habitable room. I think it will make a difference to living conditions. Also, the petitioner says that the land is higher on this so that there will be more noise and more impact. That would also add to the overshadowing. And so I'd like that to be taken into account, please. And also, could we not have a wall on this boundary, even if there's fencing on other boundaries? If there's a wall, at least that will help to mitigate some fumes and noise a little more than ordinary fencing would. I do have some sympathy. I would like to second this, I make that clear. I'm supporting officer's recommendation, but I do have some sympathy with the applicant in this case and other applicants, because I think we all know that the cost of building materials has increased really quite dramatically, and in some cases has doubled for some materials. And obviously this is, this is something that the developer has to take into account. And, I would hope that our consultant who's advising on the viability would have also taken that into account. I'm sure they would. They wouldn't have done it on an incomplete basis. But the fact of the matter is, we do not have enough affordable houses every day, and I'm sure all of us as councillors have numerous people we are dealing with, working people, working families, where we are trying to get affordable housing for them. And so I'm sorry, we really must, where it's within our policy as this is, we really must insist on that. And for those reasons, although I think it's a good development, and I thank both the applicant and officers for working so hard to get to such a good scheme, I must second this refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn. I want to split your points into two. I'm going to let James pick up the bit about the viability and let Mandip pick up the other points. But I think the point you said earlier about a policy standoff sums it all up nicely. So, James?
Mandip may add to, but I can actually comment very quickly on daylight and sunlight, and that page 68, the daylight and sunlight consultant has effectively said that there isn't any problem with the development proposals. And then on page 69, the following page, between June and August, there was a lot of discussions concerning viability. Clearly that is very recent, and therefore I think the issue with materials costs would perhaps be more of a concern if I was putting to you a report dated from June or August 2020, then the world's moved on, but this is up to date and analysis in effect. Don't know.
And the point about the boundary wall?
I think the boundary wall would be conditioned, but the condition could have been specified if this was an approval to be a solid boundary wall. I think that's something that we would definitely encourage anyway, just for the separation and adequate use of the amenity space. But again, it's not being recommended for approval.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Cawthorne, you indicated.
Thank you. Again, I support the recommendations. We can't ignore the viability assessment, and I think having a good 5-year land supply means that we are in a position to resist development that doesn't offer an appropriate quantum of affordable housing, which clearly we must have. So I fully support that. I do have a question, and it's a curious one, and perhaps a little bit left field, but on pages 62 and 63, we talk about loss of non-designated industrial land. The report poses a question as to whether the site is a non-designated industrial site or not. It goes on to talk about policy E7 and how it doesn't meet some of the tests within, but it concludes at the end that actually it's not policy yet, so as it's a small part of the site, we can get around it, kind of thing. It seemed a bit of an odd way of putting it. I don't know. I mean, is there more to that than perhaps the report's setting out? Should we be thinking about that more, or is it just a side issue, not relevant?
Can you pick that one up, Mandip? Yeah?
I can. It definitely isn't a side issue. However, this is an area that's changing, and if this was all a commercial area, we would want to protect it for commercial uses. But in an area that's changing, and with its, as the applicant has said, the regeneration benefits, it's not a small issue, but the whole site is not in employment use or designated employment use. Therefore, what you would get back is a very small, unviable commercial unit. So if it's unviable as a commercial unit, it's probably going to come back as a housing unit anyway. So we've taken a pragmatic approach when it comes to whether we did want to see any form of employment re-provided on the site. But it's not a side issue. It was thoroughly exhausted through the pre-app process and through the beginning of the application, but we feel that it's a more positive piece of development to be 100% residential. Thank you.
You okay with that?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, any other members indicating to speak on this application this evening? Okay, we are moved and we are seconded. So can I go to the vote now and take a show of hands in favour of Ross's recommendation? That's unanimous, Neil? Okay, I can confirm agenda item 7 this evening is refused. Thank you very much to everybody. We can go on to agenda item 8, which is our final petition item of this evening, which is St John's School, Potter Street Hill, Northwood Hills.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application at St John's School. This is not the normal thing that we see at Planning Committee. We are looking at the application for approval of details against a planning application that's already been approved in the past. And this is the car parking management strategy for St John's School in Potter Street Hill. We have actually approved this condition in the past. We've approved the condition at Planning Committee. I don't have the exact date, and I apologise, but I do have the planning reference number. Now, the application is back before us for consideration and has a petition in objection, which is why it's before members for consideration. The car parking management strategy is proposing to reduce the number of car parking spaces on site by 2 bays. So the parking management plan that you've approved in 2018 is changing marginally to reduce the number of overspill parking spaces. So this is all related to the community use agreement. The community use agreement with local residents has been quite vocal. It's not supported by local residents to have a community use facility on site. However, it's something that is encouraged through planning policy nationally, regionally, and even in our local plans, albeit I appreciate that there are lots of local residents who are unhappy about the movements that would continue associated with the school beyond school hours. So the community use agreement has been approved. A version of the car parking management plan has been approved, but we are here to approve a car parking management plan with 2 less car parking spaces. In all other respects, we have considered the impacts and it's not deemed to be detrimental, and we are recommending approval of the condition for the car parking management plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mandip. This is a petition item, but I'm taking it that there isn't a petitioner here or no written submission, and we've got no applicant either. So we can go straight to the debate on this one. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chairman. I live where your head is, by the way. Just there. Just be aware you're there. That's it. Fine. No, yeah, I don't really see there's a problem here. There's a lot of traffic movement when the school is active in the morning and at 4 o'clock. I don't believe that the traffic generation go further down the line is going to be anywhere near the excess that it is in the morning and the afternoon. So I don't really have a problem with this, and I will propose it, and that's it, really.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Dott beat Councillor Duncan to it, so but you're next up, Councillor Duncan. So over to you, Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing much to say on these things. I'm happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, I withdraw. I was just going to second it.
Okay, no, thank you. Right, no other members indicating to speak. We'll go to the vote. We're moved and seconded. Can I take a show of hands, please? I take that as unanimous. So agenda item 8 this evening is approved. Thank you very much, everybody. Agenda item 9, which is Millington Road in Hayes. Endit?
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 9 is Hyde Park, Hayes, building number 3 on Millington Road. Now, I think this might be the third time I've presented this site this year, and I don't know how many times I've presented it in the past. So we are here with another prior approval. Now, I'm not 100% certain what the applicant's intention with the site is, but this is for a slightly reduced, slightly varied number of units across the site. So I would ask you to turn to page 96 to consider the material planning considerations that we can take into account on a prior approval. I won't repeat this in the next item because it's another prior approval. So we've got transport and highways, contamination, flooding, noise, adequate daylight into habitable rooms and floor space standards. Now, the application before us complies with all of those requirements. There is a recommendation that whilst prior approval is required and granted, it is subject to conditions and the legal agreement that's set out on pages 96 and 97. So again, this application before us for prior approval is recommended for approval subject to the conditions and planning obligations. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. No petition on this one. And just to remind members, we've seen this one before, and it is a prior approval application. So Councillor Higgins, followed by Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, there's nothing we can really do on this one. Very, very, very disappointed that they decreased the 5 to 1. I think that's the claw, but as we've already approved it, and there's quite a good, officers have done very well out of this. I think you've done, congratulations, well done. I'd be happy. I will go with officer's recommendation for approval. Well, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's like seeing an old friend again, really, isn't it? I was thinking the other day we've not seen this one for 2 or 3 months. As Councillor Higgins says, it's regrettable that they've increased the number of 1-bedders at the expense of 2-bedders, but we've got no say, really. I'm happy to second it. There's not a lot else we can say, really.
No, thank you very much for that. Any other members wishing to speak? No. Okay, we're moved and seconded. Can go to the vote. All those in favour of officer's recommendation? That's unanimous, Neil, yeah? Okay, agenda item 9 this evening is approved. Thank you very much. Right, agenda item 10. Mandy.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 10 is Eagle Point on the runway in Ruislip. So it's a site very close to the RAF Northolt. The application site, again, is one that has been before us, but for other reasons. We recently granted planning approval for the demolition of the site and reprovision to provide a hotel use. Now, the hotel use permission still exists. It can be implemented, but the applicant has chosen to come in to revive their prior approval, which had previously expired. So this application is for the prior approval and change of use of the former office building, which is still there, so its last known use is offices, and therefore it does qualify for change of use, and that's to provide 15 flats. I'm not sure whether because of the way in which the market is, they're just trying to keep their options open, whereby they have the prior approval for residential. Now, a lot of the rest of the runway has also had prior approval conversion from office to residential, so it would be fitting for the runway if it were a residential development, albeit we have no reason to refuse it because of the primary tests set out on page 120. So this application is again recommended for approval. So prior approval is required and granted, but only subject to the planning conditions laid out in the report before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandy. And we have an addendum on this item as well. So did you want to talk to the addendum? Let members know what that involves?
Apologies, I was running through it. So we do have surplus parking at the application site. So one of the things quite rightly pointed out by the chairman is that we should try and control the surplus parking to avoid off-airport car parking or even commuter car parking. So we've added a new condition via the addendum to try and seek a strategy going forward to try and avoid those additional spaces, surplus spaces, being sold or leased. Perhaps we could encourage a child play area if this does become, or some form of amenity, if this does become residential accommodation. But we shall see what happens. That's not something we can impose, but it's something that we can say verbally and hope transpires. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you for covering that. Okay, members, open to debate now. Councillor Higgins?
Yes, sorry, I was getting my hand up first. Sorry, too slow. Yeah, first of all, what is a four-persons unit? Is it a unit or units? It's one. So it's
a two-bedroom unit where both of the bedrooms are double bedrooms.
Okay.
Therefore accommodating
so
four
I've never
persons.
seen that before. I was a bit confused. Yeah, and are we sure we shouldn't be ruling out plane parking as well? Because off the runway. Sorry, maybe I'm going a stretch too far. Don't have a problem with this. Yes, officers go with officers' recommendations. No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Cawthorne, followed by Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Quick question. Similarly, I'm with the officer on the recommendations. Just wondered about the flooding and drainage issues on page 130. The final paragraph talks about the council's officer not responding in time. I wonder if there's anything that's come in subsequently on that, and indeed whether this is a matter within our competence as a committee, given its prior approval, really. And if so, any officer comment around it, if I may. That's all.
You could pick that up, please, Bandit.
Thank you very much for picking that up. No, we have not had any further comments come in on flooding. However, we feel confident on the basis that we have had prior consents granted on this site. So we have been through a process of having appraisals of flooding and therefore are content with the conditions that have been imposed, which are as much as we can do when it's a conversion. I believe that the new hotel building had much more onerous requirements in terms of flooding and surface water because it was a knockdown and reprovision. So hopefully that's of some help.
Is that okay? Yeah. Councillor Duncan, I think you indicated.
Yes, just to second it, thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other members indicate. We are moved and seconded. Can we go to the vote, please? All those in favour? Okay. Officer's recommendation for agenda item 10 this evening is approved. Thank you very much. Right, agenda item 11 now, please, Mandip.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 11 is also a familiar friend. We discussed Minette School's temporary permission for classrooms in the playing field in this area that I'm indicating on the screen. And I said at the time that we were permitting the temporary use of one of the two playing fields at the school for temporary classrooms to enable this application, which wasn't in at the time. So we now have the planning application in. So this development is a major application by virtue of its site area. So the site area you can see, which is outlined in red, is significant and therefore it falls into the major developments category. However, and I'm not saying however because it's a bad thing, but the extensions proposed on this development are very limited. I think they result in less than a 200 square metre net increase in floor area. So the proposals are seeking to remove some of the temporary porta cabins, some of the not fit for purpose buildings, and I can show you where we are proposing to see some extensions. So at the proposed level 1, we have a few extensions, and then we have a roof plan. So there are very limited extensions, but there are some clearing up of other parts of the site. The application is recommended for approval. there is a very small addendum which I'd like to draw your attention to. The way in which condition 7 was phrased required the landscaping details to be submitted to us prior to commencement. What we're doing is amending that to say prior to the relevant parts of the works to give them more time to look at the treatments. We've also managed to secure 5 active and 5 passive electric vehicle charging points, which is a bonus because they're not actually increasing car parking on site. They are reconfiguring car parking, but there's no net increase. So we've added that into the condition to make sure it's delivered at a later date. I can take you through some photographs. The proposed elevations don't show a significant change because most of the changes are not visible from the street scene. And this is the demolition plan, so those are the areas I was talking about being some tidying up because they're not actually connected to the buildings. And at level 1, it's a very similar picture. So the application is recommended for approval.
Okay, before we go to members, I think James wants to cover off a couple of points.
Yeah, it isn't just the case we've negotiated some charging points, which is definitely good. Condition 9 references the fact that of the school estate that's being redeveloped and replaced in effect includes the boilers, so we're getting some low NOx boilers, and so we've actually conditioned through condition 9 to ensure that these green boilers get installed. So I just wanted to mention that as an additional green positive in effect, and obviously it's in an air quality management area, so that's a positive on various counts. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so lots of positives for members to debate. Councillor Higgins, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Well done, officers. Very well done. I'm really pleased with that. We did have a debate about landscaping over a 5-year period. We still have that, I think, don't we, to maintain it? Oh, that's the only thing I was...
So that would be, was that under the temporary permission?
Yes, because
Yes.
it was going to be the areas that were actually going to be part of the landscaping for the main one. My memory is usually quite good, but it could be wrong here. But.
I believe we have enhanced landscaping under the other application that was considered on the furthest most left-hand side of this plan, which is where the residential properties are.
So that's still in place, yeah? Brilliant. So I'll go with officer recognition with all those lovely goodies. I think that's really good. Good for the school, so, and look, really a school for the future. How about that?
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'd like to second. It's good to see this investment in education in the borough, and I'm sure we're all pleased to see this go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a simple question. The accessibility officer's statement on page 149, is that now inclusive and included in the non-standard condition 10?
You able to pick that one up, Mandy?
Basically, there should be a fire emergency plan that will ensure that children who are disabled can be got out of the building. I'm just assuming that that would be under item 10. Within 6 months of the date of this planning permission, a fire strategy report shall be submitted to and approved in writing. Is that part of it?
No, I believe that the accessibility officer received additional information. So at the bottom of page 149, there is an officer comment that the applicant responded to the access officer's concerns. So they would have been part of one of the documents in condition number 3 to secure the accessibility requirements. The fire safety is likely to be more to do with sprinklers and emergency access from the building. Thank you.
My glasses.
Okay, just in conversation with James there, just thinking members' views on the inclusion or the addition of a construction management condition might help things along in relation to the comments that were made there.
What I was going to request, if I may, Chairman, is whether you'd be happy to delegate to me to talk outside this meeting with the borough's highway engineers as to whether we should be adding construction management condition. The other thought that's sort of running through my head is if there's any, I'll try and word this very tactfully, if there happen to be any major regeneration schemes nearby, I hope I've worded that tactfully, then obviously if you had any overlapping construction periods, you'd certainly want a construction management condition to be in place. So I'm kind of thinking we probably would want to add one.
Okay. I'm going to look at Councillor Higgins and Councillor Duncan here who have moved and seconded. If you're happy for that to be included, then members can vote on that to be delegated to James and his team to work up the exact wording of that. Okay, no one else is indicating we're moved and seconded. Can we go to the vote, please? All those in favour of officer's recommendation? Okay, agenda item 11 this evening is unanimously approved. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 12 this evening. Mandip, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 12 is 15 to 17 Uxbridge Road. Planning permission is sought for a 14-storey high building. Now, 14 stories includes a rooftop plant, so in effect it's ground plus 12 or 13 stories. It fronts onto the Uxbridge Road. Now, 13 stories might sound significant, but if I take you through the plans and the photographs, it will provide some context and hopefully ease any concerns you might have. This is the location plan. So the application site frontage is along the main Uxbridge Road. Further to the north, you have the Lombardy Retail Park roundabout, and going out to the south, you're entering into Southall and the London Borough of Ealing. The constraints plan shows the site's location adjacent to the existing Hyatt Place Hotel, and the yellow denotes the application site is located within a designated employment area. So it's strategic industrial land. So the application proposes an apart hotel. So we are not looking at a residential use. We are looking at a long stay hotel use. And the long stay hotel use is conditioned in various places in the officer report, insofar as it cannot be occupied for more than a certain number of days. The site plan shows the wide expanse of Uxbridge Road and its sort of detachment from the main residential area to the north. This is the proposed ground floor site plan. So we have an area of green and mainly communal spaces along the ground floor of the hotel. One of the things to also point out is that some of the planning conditions seek to restrict access to some of the communal areas, such as the restaurant facilities, and I believe there's a gym on site, to only users of the hotel, the apart hotel, and that's primarily to avoid additional vehicle movements on and off and access from Uxbridge Road, so to minimise any harm. The only thing that's been assessed and deemed to be acceptable by the highways team is ancillary use of those facilities by apart hotel occupants. We have a proposed basement at the application site, and that would provide the car parking. Now, this is an apart hotel, so it doesn't need the quantum of car parking that a regular residential development would require, and it's also encouraging that there would be a travel plan sitting alongside this application to encourage sustainable modes of travel. So it's the ground floor plan. You go up building, first floor, second floor, third floor, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th. You'll see that the development has sort of reduced itself in the middle as we're going up the building, 11th, and then we have some street scene elevations. So this is the northern street scene, and it's important to note that yes, it's marginally higher than the Hyatt Place, but I do have a comparison of what we already have given permission for a few years ago, and this is a marked improvement. One of the things that I would say about the design of this building is that the way in which 2 stories have been almost packaged to look like one give an impression that it's not as high as it is. It's obviously 13 stories of accommodation, but the way in which the design shows almost half the number of stories, I think is a success in this scheme. I'll take you through the southern elevation, this is the eastern elevation, and the west. We have some CGIs that have been prepared kindly by the applicants, so we are looking at securing some additional tree planting along the frontage, and that's quite important, especially along the Uxbridge Road frontage. This is the main frontage, and this is where it's probably easiest to see that the number of stories don't look as many as the application is. We have an image from the east, southeast, and then I wanted to just give you some context of what we have granted permission for and has been implemented on the site. So at any given time, this application that we approved back in 2015-2016 can be implemented and built on site. Now the design may not be, the proposed design of the existing scheme might not be to everyone's taste, but this is the alternative. And from my perspective, the proposed scheme that we have before us is actually better than the one that we previously approved a few years ago. Again, it's always subjective. You might prefer this development. And again, this was designed so that it took its focus point of its highest point from Hyatt Place, but then reduced its scale down as it went into the industrial area. So this was the ground floor plan as approved. And I'll take you through some photographs. So this is the view as you're looking in from London Borough of Ealing into the London Borough of Hillingdon. And that is the opposite view. So the application site would be just here. We have some slightly further back views, and I don't think a lot of the building would actually be visible behind Hyatt Place when looking at it as you're approaching the London Borough of Ealing. The application has been recommended for approval subject to numerous conditions and the heads of terms set out from page 160 of the officer report. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, lots of information there for members to consider, but Councillor Higgins, you indicated first.
Thank you. Yeah, I like it. I like the different gardens as well. It's more greener, and I think that's. I mean, I know the landscape. Can we make sure that one of Janet Duncan's favourite things to make sure we have plants that are good for air quality, because I think that would really help there, and the extra trees in the front. The only other question, I've approved this, I haven't really got a problem and propose it, is the emission financial contribution. It's a lovely amount of money, I don't disagree with that. I'm just concerned that over a 30-year period, how are we going to make sure that we definitely get all of that paid? Things change in life, and how have we secured that? I don't know whether that's a legal requirement or
I think James Romandip will answer that. It's a legal agreement, but I'm sure the guys will give a technical explanation for Councillor Higgins.
I mean, in terms of actually, if where we'd receive that sum and to in fact reinvest it, we do have quite rigorous processes, and I'm sure that in itself wouldn't be an issue. So this is page 161, clause V we're talking about. It has slightly vexed me, this, because this is obviously a very large contribution, and it partly reflects the fact that rather than sort of designing the greenest possible scheme, the developer is sort of going for the carbon offset option, and I have to be honest, perhaps the preference would be that that we weren't in a situation where the developer was given such a large carbon offset. Now, some members may disagree with my viewpoint on that, but that would be my personal viewpoint. I do wonder, and this I'm coming to a point on this, I do wonder whether the developer is going to come back to us at some point and seek to retrofit internal improvements to the building, so that this wouldn't be resulting in anything different from what you're seeing in committee tonight, but somehow looking to reduce that sum. So I would actually welcome any views members might have regarding how comfortable they would be in terms of me having delegated authority to because sometimes they take a long time to get secured, these agreements, discuss that issue further with the applicant, but that partly depends on members' views on the issue of the size of that carbon offset fund and what the priority is. So apologies if I'm slightly digressing from our the normal matters we discuss at these meetings, but it is unusual to have a sum quite that large as a carbon offset.
Yeah,
there isn't anything, I suppose, in a way wrong with it, but it's, in my particular view, it would be better if the scheme was designed internally in terms of all its sort of engineering in such a way that there wasn't such a large carbon offset.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. It's just that, you know, I'm not going to be in 30 years to make sure they're still paying it. So that's not my only. But no. But anyway, yes, I agree with that. That'd be great if you could do that. Yeah.
Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question with regards to employment. Report says 60 full-time positions will be given to local residents. How we ensure the positions are secured by for local residents, not for others?
Okay. Question for Mandip maybe on this one?
I'm happy to take that. We have an economic development officer in-house, and we have quite a lot of measures in place in order to make sure that we're delivering employment training at both construction phase and then also when it comes to a hotel, the final stage operation. So that's laundry, front of house, perhaps a chef, and so on. So one of the ways in which that's done is that we gain, through the legal agreement for employment training, exclusivity to advertise to local residents for usually a period of time. I think Nicole might know that the Nook's 6 months. So we get 6 months exclusivity, and it shouldn't take us, we should be able to fill positions within 6 months within the London Borough of Hillingdon. Beyond that, then they get advertised externally, and that's the way in which we have this employment training programme and the heads of terms, which gives us exclusivity before the operator is allowed to go out to the open market as such.
I suppose a supplementary to that I would just add is given its proximity to the boundaries at Ealing, does that have an impact?
I think usually their first preference after we've advertised to the London Borough of Hillingdon, we can write that into the employment training obligations, so that first preference is, or if you want us to open it up to both boroughs at the first instance again. Oh, okay.
No, I think it was just whether or not what the priority was, and I think I'm judging that members are happy with the priority as it is. So, okay. Thank you, Councillor Dott. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, thank you. Sorry to spoil the party. I feel it's too high. And so previously we approved 131 bedroom apart hotel. This is just, you know, the other one was just okay when you compared it with the higher. This is, you know, smaller site, it's going up even more. And to me, it doesn't sit well in the landscape, and it doesn't sit well in relation to the other high building there. So I'm sorry, I'm not, you know, not happy with this. I know it says that they have to have 70 to 80 bedrooms as minimum threshold for viably delivering a hotel. Well, I think 131 is a good number over that. It's 50 over 80. So, you know, 60 over the other. So, I don't know that this is really necessary, and I don't think it adds to the landscape, in my view. So, sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any other speakers on this application? Just to remind members, we are moved and we're not seconded. Councillor Dott, you're happy to second? Okay. So now we are moved and we are seconded. So we can go to the vote on this one. All those in favour of this application? Councillor Duncan, you abstaining? You're against? Okay. So we've got one against, but that does mean that agenda item 12 this evening is carried and approved. Thank you very much. Okay, members and officers, that brings us to the final application of the evening, which is agenda item 13. We've seen this one before and we're now seeing it again, which is the Barton Buildings Uxbridge Industrial Estate. Mandy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the application site before us has been to Planning Committee. When it was approved at Planning Committee last, we were approving two industrial units to serve the industrial estate. The applicants have come back in, perhaps due to viability or the market reasons, to seek to consolidate. So this is the existing site plan, just for context. It's a single-storey building. But the application now only proposes one larger unit. There is still a yard to serve and accommodate the unit itself. We still have parking off Arundel Road. And I have a comparative slide of the floor plans and the elevations, which do show, I think, we're getting a much better scheme with a better frontage on Arundel Road. I know not many people use Arundel Road unless you're visiting a premise there, but there's no reason to not have a nicer frontage. Yes. So this is a comparison of the previously approved scheme, which had 2 units, and we're now currently proposing just a single unit. This is the street frontage along Arundel Road. So as previously approved, there was very little interaction at street level, and under the proposed scheme, there's a little bit more connectivity with the street, with some more visibility and possibly natural surveillance. We maybe should have pushed for this in the last application, but we didn't. But we've got it now. So the application is recommended for approval. In all respects, I believe all aspects of the scheme are very similar, and there is no harm from the development arising from the scheme. All of the conditions and the heads of terms are set out in the officer report from page 216 onwards. I apologise, there is no legal agreement, there is no obligation of requirements, it's just a conditional permission. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mandip. I've got Councillor Higgins indicated, followed by Councillor Duncan. Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, no brainer here. This is the first time I could actually say that with something coming back to us to be changed, because usually when they come back it's something hideous. But this one, no problem. I'll go with officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, pleased to see this, and I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other speakers this evening? We're moved and seconded. Can go to the vote. All those in favour of agenda item 13 this evening? That's unanimous. Okay, agenda item 13 is approved this evening. Okay, that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting this evening. Thank you very much to members, thank you very much to officers, thank you to those who spoke this evening, petitioners and applicants, and thank you very much to those watching on YouTube as well. We're going to close the meeting now and bid you all a good evening. Thank you.